Harper Audio presents All I Love and Know by Judith Frank, performed by Peter Berkrot. But these 3 cubic feet of bone and blood and meat are all I love and know. Loudon Wainwright III, One-Man Guy. 1. Chapter 1. He had thought that watching a movie would agreeably distract him, but the images unspooling on the tiny screen and the tinny sound coming through the headphones were an irritant, like an inexpert touch between a tickle and a scratch. Matt sat back in his seat and took off his headphones, crammed a pillow behind his head and shoulders, closed his eyes. The events of the past day came streaking toward him, and he opened his eyes again quickly. He stole a glance at his partner, Daniel, but there, too, he had to look away. The sight was so shocking. Daniel's head hung, his chin touching his chest. Matt had called the doctor and gotten some Ativan, and Daniel was far gone on it. His lips were slack, his eyes cratered and bruised. In a single day, his dark hair and beard stubble had become streaked with gray, something Matt had always thought was a horror story cliché. Daniel was all of 38 and looked ancient and decrepit, Matt thought, and was immediately ashamed of himself. Matthew Greene was 6 years younger than his partner, tall and thin, with a head of thick brown hair that lightened in the summer sun. He had a handsome, angular face and a grin that placed a perfect demonic dimple in his cheek, so that his smile looked more wicked than he intended. Now his eyes were grainy with exhaustion. They were a few hours into their flight to Tel Aviv, and meal carts were starting to be rolled down the aisle, bringing with them the smell of cooked meat. The Ativan was in Daniel's bag in the overhead, and he contemplated getting up and fishing it out. He hadn't till now, because somebody had needed to be on the ball, but now he felt wasted, his mind humming and strung out. Was it only yesterday that the call had come from Daniel's father? Time seemed bundled and knotted, and when he tried to calculate the hours backward, they evaporated before his eyes. When the call came, he had been sitting at the computer in his study, watching a chickadee make restless, shivery passes at the bird feeder in the bare backyard. After he ended the call, he put the phone back into its charger very carefully. He stood and looked around, then sat down on the floor. The room was thunderously quiet, and he was bewildered to be alone with this information. He wondered, when did an event like this actually take? If he sat there very quietly, could he prevent it from coursing out into the wider world, where it would happen to other people instead of just to him and Daniel's father? The dog ambled up, and he clutched its big head, trembling, thinking that every moment that passed without his breaking the news to Daniel would remain a happy moment from Daniel's old life. 20 minutes passed. He was conscious of his bare feet getting cold, of the dog's sigh, and of the study darkening as clouds passed over the weak March sun. Finally, the image of Daniel working tranquilly in his office, innocent of the knowledge that his world was about to be destroyed, became even more unbearable than the idea of telling him, and he stood. He went into the bedroom and put on a sweatshirt, found his coat and keys, and went out to the car. As he drove, he let his mind deliberate, but forbade his heart to register, practicing fiercely how to say it, how to build up to it gradually without torturing Daniel with suspense. He had made Daniel's father promise not to call him at work, to let Matt break the news himself. He was glad he could be the one to tell Daniel, but agonized over it too, wondering if Daniel would ever forgive him for being the one to tell him his twin brother Joel had died. He pushed back to recline his plane seat. He remembered getting to public affairs and going into the office of the director, Daniel's boss, April, so Daniel could make a quick exit without having to excuse himself. Matt stood before her and made his first attempt at saying the words out loud. Daniel's brother and sister-in-law were killed in a cafe bombing in Jerusalem. April cried out and clutched her heart. He had never uttered words before that had so much sheer physical power. They gave him an embarrassing sense of
Sample complete. Ready to continue?